You scroll through your phone and see people posting their lives like it is nothing. Smiling faces, perfect angles, moments turned into something public, and for a second, you wonder why it feels so easy for them. Because, for you, even the idea of being seen feels uncomfortable. Almost like something inside you quietly pulls you back. You have photos, memories, things you could share just like everyone else. But when it comes to actually posting something, stops you. It is not laziness, and it is not that you do not exist. It feels deeper, like a quiet resistance you cannot explain, like your mind is protecting you from something invisible. And maybe you have even asked yourself this question before. Why do I hate being seen when everyone else seems fine with it? Why does attention feel heavy instead of exciting? Why does visibility feel like exposure instead of connection? And the truth is, this feeling is more common than you think. Psychology says your brain is always trying to keep you safe, not just physically, but emotionally and socially too. So when being seen feels unsafe, your brain reacts, even if there is no real danger in the moment, because your mind remembers things your conscious self forgets. One of the biggest reasons you avoid being seen is self-awareness. Not the healthy kind, but the kind that watches everything you do. You notice how you look, how you sound, how people might judge you. And instead of just existing, you observe yourself constantly, turning simple moments into something mentally exhausting. Research shows high self-awareness is linked to social anxiety. Not always extreme, but enough to make you hesitate, because your brain starts simulating other people's opinions. What will they think? What will they notice? What will they assume? And suddenly being seen feels like standing under a spotlight. So instead of risking that feeling, you step back. You choose silence over exposure, invisibility over discomfort, not because you are weak, but because your mind is overloaded, trying to control how you are perceived at all times, and that pressure quietly drains you. Another reason you hate being seen is fear of judgment, and this does not always come from nowhere. Psychology says past experiences shape present behavior. Maybe you were judged, criticized, or misunderstood before, and your brain learned to associate visibility with pain. So now even harmless attention feels threatening because your mind does not separate past from present clearly. It reacts as if the same thing could happen again, even if the situation is completely different now. Because your brain prioritizes safety over logic, you might not even remember the exact moment this started, but the feeling stayed and slowly became part of you. A quiet belief that being seen leads to being judged, and being judged leads to discomfort or rejection. So avoiding visibility becomes your natural response. There is also something deeper happening inside you. A strong need for control over how you are perceived. Because once something is visible, it is no longer yours. People interpret it, form opinions, attach meanings, and you lose control over your own image. Psychology calls this impression management sensitivity. Your brain wants to carefully control how others see you, but social situations are unpredictable and messy. So instead of risking misinterpretation, you hold back because silence feels safer than being misunderstood. And this is where overthinking quietly takes over. You imagine different reactions before they even happen. You analyze small details that others would never notice. And you build scenarios in your mind that feel real, even though they only exist inside your thoughts. Research shows overthinking increases avoidance behavior because your brain believes it has already experienced the outcome, even if it has not actually happened in reality. So, avoiding being seen feels logical to your mind, even though it is limiting your expression. Another powerful reason is low need for external validation. Not everyone craves attention or approval from others, and if you are someone who finds validation internally, then being seen does not feel necessary. Because your sense of worth does not depend on others. You do not feel the need to prove your life to anyone. You do not need likes, comments, or reactions to feel real. And while this can be a strength, it also creates distance, because you naturally avoid spaces where visibility matters. And social platforms are built around being seen. Psychology says introverted personalities often behave this way. They process internally rather than externally. They reflect instead of perform. They observe instead of display. And because of that, being seen feels unnatural, almost like speaking a language that is not yours. You might enjoy experiences deeply, but privately, A beautiful moment feels complete without sharing it. In fact, sharing it might even feel like reducing it, turning something meaningful into something performative. And that disconnect makes you pull away even more. There is also emotional sensitivity involved. People who feel deeply often protect themselves more, because being seen means being exposed emotionally. And not everyone feels safe with that level of openness. So your mind builds quiet boundaries to protect you. You might not say it out loud, but part of you feels this: if people really see me, will they understand me? Or will they misread me, judge me, reduce me? And that uncertainty creates hesitation every time, making invisibility feel like emotional safety. Another concept psychology highlights is the spotlight effect. Your brain makes you believe people notice you more than they do. In reality, most people are focused on themselves, but your mind exaggerates how much attention you receive, making being seen feel far more intense than it actually is. So, when you think about posting or speaking up, your brain tells you everyone will notice every detail, every flaw, every imperfection, every small mistake, even though most people will barely pay attention. But your mind still reacts as if it matters deeply. This creates a loop of avoidance and reinforcement. You avoid being seen, which reduces immediate discomfort, and your brain learns that avoidance equals safety. So it repeats the behavior again and again, until invisibility becomes your default state. And the longer this continues, the more normal it feels. You start believing this is just who you are, someone who prefers to stay hidden, unnoticed, quiet. But in reality, it is a learned pattern, shaped by your experiences, thoughts, and emotional responses. There is also a fear of vulnerability hidden underneath, because being seen is not just about appearance. It is about showing parts of yourself to others. And vulnerability always carries some level of risk. Even if that risk is only imagined, research shows people avoid vulnerability to protect self-image. Because once something is visible, it can be judged. And that judgment can affect how you see yourself. So your brain avoids situations where that could happen, even if it means limiting your expression. At the same time, you might notice something interesting. You do not hate being seen completely. You just hate being seen in a way you cannot control. You are comfortable with the right people in safe spaces, where you feel understood and accepted. This shows the problem is not visibility itself. It is unsafe visibility, unpredictable exposure, where you cannot manage how you are perceived, and your brain reacts by avoiding those situations because it values emotional safety above everything. Psychology says your brain constantly scans for threats, not just physical ones, but social and emotional ones. Rejection, embarrassment, misunderstanding all count as threats. So if being seen feels like it could lead to those, your mind will quietly guide you away from it. And the interesting part is, this happens automatically. You do not consciously decide to avoid being seen. It just feels natural, like the obvious choice, because your brain has already labeled it as unsafe. Even if logically you know it is not dangerous, you might even admire people who express themselves freely, who post confidently, who speak without hesitation. And part of you wonders what that feels like, to exist without constantly filtering yourself, to be seen without feeling exposed. But your experience is different, and that is okay, because psychology also says awareness is the first step. Once you understand why you feel this way, you start separating yourself from the pattern. Instead of believing it defines you completely, you begin to notice when your mind exaggerates situations, when it predicts judgment that may never happen, when it holds you back from simple expressions, and slowly that awareness creates a small gap between your thoughts and your actions. That gap is where change becomes possible. Not forced, not rushed, but gradual and natural. You do not have to suddenly become someone else. You just need to understand what your mind is doing and respond differently little by little, because hating being seen does not mean something is wrong with you. It often means your mind learned to protect you deeply from things that once felt uncomfortable or unsafe. And that protection stayed even when you no longer needed it, becoming part of how you move through the world. And when you look at it this way, it feels different, less like a flaw and more like a pattern that can be understood, reshaped, softened, without forcing yourself into something unnatural. But by slowly expanding your comfort zone, maybe that means sharing something small, speaking a little more, expressing one thought honestly. Not to impress anyone, but to challenge the pattern. To show your brain that being seen is not always dangerous, that it can also be neutral, even safe. Because your brain learns from experience, not just logic. And every small step rewrites that internal rule, from stay hidden to maybe it is okay, from avoid attention to maybe I can handle it, from fear to quiet confidence. And over time, that feeling of resistance softens, not completely disappearing, but becoming manageable. You stop seeing visibility as a threat and start seeing it as a choice, something you can control instead of avoid. So if you hate being seen, understand this clearly. It does not mean you are broken or different in a bad way. It means your mind is trying to protect you, using patterns that once made sense, even if they do not fully serve you anymore. And maybe the goal is not to force yourself into the spotlight, but to remove the fear attached to it. To reach a point where being seen does not feel heavy, where you can choose when to show up and when to stay private, without anxiety making that decision for you, because in the end, being seen is not the real issue. Feeling unsafe while being seen is, and once you understand that difference, you stop fighting yourself and start understanding yourself. And that is where real change begins. So the next time you hesitate, pause for a moment, not to force yourself, but to notice your thoughts, to see what your mind is trying to protect you from, and to gently question if that protection is still needed. Because sometimes it is just an old pattern repeating, and slowly, quietly, without pressure, you begin to take back control from that pattern, not by becoming someone else, but by allowing yourself to exist a little more openly, in your own way, at your own pace. And maybe one day being seen will not feel like exposure. It will feel like expression, something natural and calm. Not something you fear, but something you choose. And that shift, no matter how small, changes everything inside you.